Take 4. Okay, I don't know if takes are something that YouTubers actually do, but honestly, it's really pathetic the amount of times that I've started videos only to stop them because I've made some huge blunder. Look at me being the amateur I am. I am back with my second video. Today, I want to talk about Riverdale. And before we get into that, I just want to let you guys know that I'm a professional now. I've got this fancy ring light set up in front of me right now. It was the cheapest ring light I could find, and it honestly might be complete garbage. You guys can let me know in the comments. Today, I want to talk about Riverdale. The reason for this is because I recently started rewatching Riverdale after a very long time of not watching Riverdale. What am I trying to say? When I was 14ish, when Riverdale was first really popular, I did watch the show. I watched, I want to say, the first 4 seasons, and then I was like, this is too terrible. I can't do this anymore. I can't. So I quit, and I kind of forgot about the show. Honestly, I didn't think much about it until fairly recently when I was looking for something new to destroy my brain cells with, and what do you know, Riverdale pops up in my Netflix recommended. And me, currently drowning in all of the college homework that I have to do, I was like, you know what? I think I will. And I think I like Riverdale. Let me explain. Why don't I just start from the beginning of the plot and we'll work our way down. Riverdale is a story about a town, a quiet town, a town where nothing unusual happens. Riverdale is the town where your parents want you to grow up. It's where all the kids are good, they go to school, they get straight A's, you know, they fall in love with the kid next door, and then they go to a small local college nearby and they get married to the person they grew up next door to, and then they have 2.5 kids. And that's pretty much it. That's Riverdale. That's the whole show. Riverdale is supposedly a very good, quiet, calm town, but there are these 2 characters in the show named Cheryl and Jason, and they are twins. And they decide to go for a boat ride, as 2 rich children, teenagers do, on the 4th of July. And Jason supposedly drowns. And it's, you know, a big to-do, very tragic, very sad. Death never happens in Riverdale, especially not to someone so young. And so the entire town is just shook, especially Cheryl, who was obviously there when her brother drowned. So this takes place immediately following the aftermath of that. So this takes place over the summer, and then we skip ahead a little bit and school is starting. So it's the first day of school, and we hone in on 2 of our main characters, Archie and Betty. And no, don't ask me for their last names because I could not tell you in this moment. So Archie and Betty are neighbors. They live across the street from each other. They grew up next to each other. They are besties. And Betty has a secret crush on Archie, but we can't let him know that. He doesn't know that. He's dumb. Yeah, so Betty is low-key in love with Archie, and Archie is just a dumb boy who recently, through the help of his music teacher, acquired a love for music. And he's going through a Troy Bolton-esque crisis where he's trying to choose between football and music, his passion. And honestly, with songwriting gifts like his, who can blame him? I guess this is where we should go into the whole thing with Archie and his music teacher. So here's an aspect of the show that isn't great. I don't love it. Archie is dating his music teacher, Miss Grundy. They started hooking up over the summer, and Archie quickly becomes very enamored by her and her love for music, and she encourages him to pursue music in a way that no one else ever has before. And so he feels like he has this really deep, really special connection with her, and it's bad. It's so bad. And that's something that I hate in shows like this, where they depict relationships between students and teachers like it's a Romeo and Juliet type situation when it's not. For example, if any of you have watched Pretty Little Liars, we all know how things ended with Arya and Ezra. I hated it from beginning to end. And then we see it again in A Teacher with, I wish I could tell you the names of the people who were in that show. I will include it somewhere after this video if I remember. But we see student-teacher relationships depicted a lot in teen TV, and it's something that I don't really love, as no one should. No one should love that. It is peak abuse, and we see that a lot through Grundy's time on the show too, because she's on the show for 3 or 4 episodes, and I'm getting way too ahead of myself, I'm sorry, but we're just gonna move on for now, and I'll come back to it when it's important to talk about. Okay. So then we're gonna move on to our next character of interest. Should I talk about Betty? I'll talk about her later, because she's my favorite. We're gonna talk about Veronica. And Veronica is not the girl next door. She is the girl from New York. She's very high society. She's very rich. She dresses like a 40-year-old woman, possibly a woman who's even older than that. She dresses like a very old person, and I can't imagine any teenager who would want to wear heels and like Valentino dresses to school, even if that were allowed in the dress code. I was homeschooled, so I don't really know how dress codes work, but I'm pretty sure the majority of teenagers don't go to school in like Valentino and Gucci and Hermes and stuff like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, like, maybe you were the peak of fashion in high school, in which case I respect that. But when you are rushing from class to class all day, I just don't see how convenient it is to be running around in heels. Anyway, Veronica's rich. She's like filthy rich. And she and her mom recently moved to Riverdale from New York because her dad got involved in a scandal and now he's in jail and everything's bad. She's kind of dumb. Personally, Veronica's not my favorite character. She's very wrapped up in herself, very snobby, very shallow, which is to be expected, and she does have character growth, but we all have our different opinions, and I'll probably explain more why I don't like Veronica as we go along. All of this is just as we go along. Just bear with me or don't. I'm honestly not expecting anyone to watch this video. Moving on. So Veronica moves to town, blah, 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 and Betty is her person who's like showing her around school and stuff. I don't know what that person's actually called. She's telling her about the school and all the stuff that's happened, and then someone says something about Jason, and she's like, oh my gosh, who was Jason? Betty has to tell her about like Jason Blossom drowning in the river, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, maybe this town doesn't suck as much as I thought it did. But Veronica and Betty quickly become like best friends. Like, forget Archie, no one needs him anymore, we've got girl power now. And Betty seems very insecure. Betty, I love Betty. She's, you know, your girl next door, the Nancy Drew type. She's really smart, straight A student. She's got the complicated family and the shunned sister who we'll learn more about later. And she's beautiful. Oh my gosh, Lily Reinhart is just, I could go on a whole tangent about Lily Reinhart. Make this video me being a lesbian for Betty Cooper for 20 minutes straight. My coffee's lukewarm. Right, Betty, she's giving Veronica the tour. Then they're approached by Cheryl, who is the sister of the now dead person, Jason. You know. You probably know all of this already anyway. Why am I making this video? Anyway, so Cheryl's being her usual mean girl self. She's really mean, especially now that Jason's died, because she's got to be a bitch for 2 people now, apparently. She says something about Veronica being on the cheerleading squad, and Veronica's like, oh my gosh, I would be a great cheerleader. And then, like, she asks Betty if she's a cheerleader or something like that. And Betty's like, oh no, like, I tried out for cheerleading last year, but Cheryl said I'm too fat. So Veronica encourages Betty to try out for the cheerleading squad with her. And Betty's like, well, I'll do it if you do it. Okay. There's this whole, like, catty showdown between Veronica and Cheryl because Cheryl wants to let Veronica on the squad, but not Betty. And Veronica's like, oh my gosh, why? Betty's amazing. And Cheryl's like, yeah, but I just don't like her. And Veronica's like, well, if you want me, you have to take her because we're a package deal. And so Cheryl's like, ugh, fine, whatever. All this happens, and Veronica and Betty, they are besties now within the span of what, a day? And Veronica convinces Betty that she should ask Archie to the dance. So Betty is going to ask Archie to the dance, but then she chickens out and asks Archie to take her and Veronica to the dance together. And Archie's like, no man, like, dances just aren't for me. But Betty's like, oh my gosh, please, like, we'll have so much fun with you. And, you know, we need this after that kid died in our town. Like, we really just need to have some fun. Oh my gosh, Archie, stop being such a buzzkill. And so Archie decides to take them. So they go to the dance. I actually don't think anything happens at the dance either because I didn't write anything down. However, I do have notes for after the dance, which is when Cheryl invites them all to a party at her house. They go, as teenagers do, and they start having some fun. I believe Cheryl is the one who proposes the game 7 Minutes in Heaven. They play the game, and instead of Betty going into the closet for a steamy makeout session with Archie, it's Veronica. So Veronica goes into the closet with Archie, and they just kind of stand there, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, this is so lame. Veronica knows, keep in mind, that Betty's got a thing for Archie. And Veronica doesn't know this dude at all other than the fact that he can write lame songs and sing, like, kind of decently. Not even that decently, honestly. Suffice it to say, they end up making out. Surprise, surprise. Who cares? Betty does. So Betty leaves the party and she's all upset. Veronica and Archie try to make things better, and I think they make things worse for a little bit. I can't really remember. But then I think the next... No, it's still the night of the party, right? Because Betty asks Archie, like, if he loves her, and Archie's like, of course I do. And she's like, but not the way that I want you to. And it's very emotional, very heartbreaking, just the epitome of teenage angst. So she goes home and she's all upset, and then, like, they text each other while looking at each other through the window, and he's all like, can we please talk about this? And she's like, no, I have nothing to say to you. But then we cut to the next morning, and she shows up outside his house, and she's like, hey, so I'm kind of over it. I still want to be besties if you're down. And he is down. So they go on being friends until they aren't, because I think at lunchtime he, like, pulls out his guitar and he's playing one of his lame songs, and Betty's like, she runs away crying. Of course she does. That's all that happens with that. And then at the end of the episode, Jason Blossom's body shows up, like, on the shore of a lake. They find his body. So everyone is pretty shook by that. Everyone's kind of shocked. They're like, oh my gosh, like, we thought that he was gone. Like, we dragged the lake and we couldn't find his body, and now it's just here. This sends the entire town spiraling. Most notably because there is a bullet wound in Jason's head, which means he probably didn't drown, I would guess. So we move on to episode 2. Everyone is, you know, still reeling from the whole Jason thing. And Archie and Miss Grundy, they're, like, kind of pumping the brakes on this a little bit, because I could lose my job. You could be expelled. We could go to jail. This is a major uh-oh. First of all, because of the manipulation. Second of all, she's trying to convince Archie that he would get in trouble. Like, no, he wouldn't. What about this would be his fault? Why would he be expelled? You would go to jail, yes, but you deserve to go to jail because you're committing a crime, and you know it. I digress. Betty's mom is exuding some very toxic behavior. She tells Betty that she can't hang out with Archie and Veronica or Cheryl, even though she and Cheryl aren't really friends, so I don't know why that was a big deal. But so no Archie, no Veronica, no Cheryl. No friends basically, because Betty's mom is very also manipulative. A lot of people on the show are manipulative, and that's one of the biggest traits about the show. Oh, I take back what I said before, because the whole thing with Betty and Archie making up that happens now, because now I'm reading my notes for real. They make up immediately after Betty's mom is like, no more hanging out with Archie. She goes over and she's like, hey Archie, want to hang out? I have more notes about Grundy because she lies to Archie because he asks her if what they have is real, and Grundy says that it is, to make him stay quiet because he wants to go to the police about the fact that they were at Sweetwater River on July 4th when Jason was presumably murdered at this point, because you know they found him with the gunshot wound, and Grundy and Archie were at Sweetwater River on July 4th and they heard a gunshot, but they didn't pay any mind to it because I mean they live in America and it was the 4th of July, so it could have easily been fireworks. Or even if it was a gun, people unfortunately don't take that seriously sometimes. They kind of like ignored it, and then the whole thing with Jason happened, and then they were like, well, there's no sense talking about the fact that we were there, like that's not gonna do anything. But then Archie's like, well, we heard a gunshot, like we were kind of witnesses, we should go. And Grundy's like, no, because like I would get in trouble and you would get in trouble, blah blah blah. Oh right, okay, but the whole thing with them like talking or whatever happens in the music room at school because that's smart. And Jughead, who is one of Archie's best friends, sees them. So Archie has been distancing himself from Jughead and everyone else over the summer while he has been dating Miss Grundy. And Jughead confronts Archie about it, I believe prior to this, and Archie's just like, nah man, like you wouldn't understand, it's just deep teenage stuff. Jughead, you know, gets all aggravated about it, but then he sees him in the music room and he's like, oh shit, as a good friend should. And so he confronts Archie about it, but Archie tells him not to say anything because it's not his business, and I love her, blah 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 blah. Okay, now we're gonna get into our next exciting bit. So Veronica gets slut-shamed by some guy named like Muck, maybe? Something like that. Anyway, so here's the part where I present to you my argument that Riverdale is a comedy. As serious a topic as this is, and though normally this would send my feminist rage off the charts, Chuck calls himself an alpha to Veronica in the cafeteria in front of so many people. He calls himself an alpha, says that her beta tactics won't work on him or anyone else in Riverdale, and then he barks at her. He and all of his little football buddies, they bark at her. It is probably the most hilarious thing that I have ever seen in a TV show ever. But anyway, all this aside, it is actually a pretty serious thing because it turns out that Chuck and the other football boys, they have a burn book that's more like you know, like the burn book from Mean Girls. They have one of those, but instead of them like being mean to just people in general, they are slut-shaming girls they've slept with. And Betty gets upset by this, first of all, because she cares about the safety of girls in their school, and second of all, because she finds out that Polly's name is in this book. Polly, her older sister, was dating Jason Blossom. And, you know, obviously anyone's gonna be upset when they find out that their sister has been slut-shamed by their boyfriend. I mean, whether he's dead or not. The whole thing kind of spirals out of control because Betty decides she wants to do something about it. And she does something about it. One of the girls who was shamed, her name is Ethel. Ethel is one of the girls who was shamed by these douches, and she tells Betty that she can use her house's hot tub. And Betty decides to kind of trick Chuck into meeting up with her so she can get information out of him in her Nancy Drew way, except she doesn't go the Nancy Drew route. She goes to see him at the diner where they all frequent, and she's all like, hey, like, what if we got together and, you know, did stuff? And he's like, oh my gosh, like, I am so down. They make plans to meet up at Ethel's in her hot tub, and he shows up there, and Veronica's there, not Betty. And Veronica's like, oh my gosh, hi, we thought it would be more fun if there were two of us. He's like, coolio. They get in the hot tub, and then Betty comes out, and Betty is dressed very strangely, to say the least. She's put on a very bad wig. She's wearing some black lacy scandalous lingerie. She handcuffs Chuck to the hot tub, and she kind of attempts to drown him a little bit to make him say on video what he did and, you know, like, confess to the whole book. And then she kind of goes into this space where she's not Betty anymore, she's Polly in her mind. So she shoves his head underwater, and then she's like, apologize for what you did to me. And in her mind, she's Polly and he's Jason and all that. And he's like, bitch, you're crazy. But then she pours maple syrup on his face, and it is very bizarre. And he ends up saying what she wants him to. After that, things are still very, very weird. He gets kicked off the football team because, you know, they can't have some jerky dude be captain of the football team anymore. Actually, I don't know if he gets kicked off the football team. I guess we'll figure it out as we continue watching the show, you and I. He does, however, get suspended, not expelled, which I would argue he probably should have gotten expelled, considering he was saying some very nasty things about very many girls and probably did quite a few things that he shouldn't have. But I digress. He gets suspended. Betty and Veronica also get in trouble, but to a lesser degree, and I was kind of surprised by that because what they did was pretty severe. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think they're in the wrong, but the whole, like, near drowning in a hot tub and maple syrup combo just got some moral implications. I don't know. I forgot to tell you guys about how, like, Archie, his dad is having a hard time coming around to the music thing, but then I believe he talks to Miss Grundy. I don't know if that's when this happens, but I believe it is. So Archie's dad talks to Miss Grundy, and he's like, do you think my son has any talent? And she's like, well, the world might not, but it would be sucky not to let him try. Archie's dad soundproofs the garage. How sweet is that? Archie's dad, he's a pretty good dad. I'm not even going to lie. He's probably the best parent on the show. He's probably the only non-toxic parent on this show, and he genuinely always tries to do right by Archie, even if he doesn't always communicate with him the way he probably should. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's all I have for that episode. We're gonna skip episode 4 because I didn't write anything down. And then we're gonna move on to episode 5, which is when Jason's memorial takes place. And Cheryl's mother, we see some extreme child abuse from her in this because she is very harsh towards Cheryl, both verbally and physically. I believe she grabs her in a way that no mother should ever grab her child. Cheryl wants to speak at Jason's memorial and have an honest speech about who Jason was and how much he meant to her, and for some reason her parents get mad at her and they say that she's embarrassing the family, and it's just very sad. The poor girl just lost the only person in the world who loves her, and her parents are telling her that she has disgraced him. Betty and Jughead crash the memorial, not because they want to give their respects to Jason, but because they want to do some sleuthing, some digging around, some sneaking. They sneak up to Jason's room, and Betty and Jughead, right, so they find out from Cheryl's, like, grandmother or great-grandmother, who for some reason is just chilling in Jason's room. They find out that Jason and Polly were engaged. Shocker. Clearly it throws a wrench into the story of Jason's murder, because now there are more people who could have done it, right? Like, we're narrowing in on the suspects. During this whole time, Betty doesn't know what's happened with Polly. All her parents have told her is that after Jason and Polly broke up, Polly had a psychotic breakdown. She just fell apart. Betty doesn't seem to completely believe this, but she has no proof to really deny it. But after finding out about Jason and his relationship with her, she goes on a mission to find Polly. And she finds out that her parents have placed Polly in a mental institution. It's called the Sisters of Quiet Mercy. And it's a very Catholic-based, religious kind of psychiatric hospital, like inpatient therapy. And Betty goes to see her. And she finds out that Polly is pregnant with Jason's baby. Surprise. Betty certainly is. And she's like, oh my gosh, is this why mom and dad sent you away? What are we living in? The 15th century? And Polly's like, yeah, basically. But then Polly has another kind of nervous breakdown because Betty tells her that something happened to Jason. Something bad happened. And Polly did not know any of this because her parents sent her away before everything happened with Jason, before his murder, because Polly and Jason had planned to run away together once she found out she was pregnant. This clearly throws a wrench in her future, and yeah, it's not good. Betty, gets kicked out of the hospital, whatever, and she can't go see Polly again. That's pretty much it on that front. Archie performs a song. That's all I have written. I don't know what else he does. I'm sure it was a very big deal to him, but I have nothing else to say. We're gonna skip some more because I don't have anything written for episode 7 or 8 or 9. But during all of this, I guess it's important to note that during all of this, Jughead and Betty have become very close. They have started dating. Surprise, surprise. And in episode 10, Betty decides to throw Jughead a surprise birthday party, and Jughead is not the kind of person who likes surprises or parties, and so this is why he is reasonably upset when Betty throws him a party. At first, it's just a small gathering of friends, even though Jughead says that, like, the only friends he really considers his inner circle are Archie and Betty. She invites Veronica and Kevin is the sheriff's son, and he invites his boyfriend Joaquin, and it's just a whole big thing, and Jughead gets very upset. But then Cheryl and Chuck, the douchebag, crash the party, and things kind of go off the rails. They just have an all-out kegger, and Jughead gets really mad, and so he leaves, and Betty goes after him to the garage, and she's like, I don't understand why you don't, like, appreciate this. And he's like, I'm a weirdo, Betty. I'm weird. Do you see this hat? It's weird. Archie gets hammered. And I need to mention too, I'm so sorry that I did not mention this before, but Miss Grundy leaves. I believe in episode 4. I think that's when she leaves, because Betty's mom finds out about the relationship that he has with Miss Grundy by snooping through Betty's diary. And then Archie's dad gets involved, and it's a whole thing, and Miss Grundy leaves, and the way she leaves kind of implies that she's going to continue preying on other teenage boys. No surprise there. Nothing's ever done about it. But she probably didn't kill Jason, considering we haven't seen her again. So I don't really know what that whole thing was about, considering she was only there for 2 seconds and she was only there to abuse and complicate the life of a sophomore in high school. Archie's dad is pretty good about it. He's very supportive of Archie, but it's never really brought up again. We're gonna move on from that completely, and I just forgot about it earlier, but now we're going to move on back to the party. So he got drunk and blah blah blah. He had like some brief girl drama with this girl who was part of Josie and the Pussycats, which is this band who's apparently all that in Riverdale. They're okay, I guess. Not personally my taste, but you do you girls. Anyway, he had this brief thing with this girl named Val, and then she dumped him because he's a train wreck. And he was like, but oh my gosh, you shouldn't have done that. And then I think she like pours beer on him, or it probably wasn't that dramatic. That's just how I'm remembering it. Then he sleeps with Veronica. So they sleep together at Jughead's party. Big surprise there. After the whole thing with Polly, with Betty finding Polly at the Waters of Quiet Mercy or whatever it's called, she comes back home for a little bit to stay with Betty and her family, but then she doesn't want to do that anymore because she finds out that her parents want her to give up the baby for adoption, and Polly doesn't want to do that. So she goes to live with the Blossoms, who have been highly involved in scandal all throughout this show up to this point. But they're like, oh my gosh, yes, like any child of Jason's is part of the Blossom family and you're welcome here. And so Polly goes to live with them. And this is all very weird because you can tell that the Blossoms obviously just want her under their thumb so they can keep their eye on their son's spawn. It's never really said what they plan to do about Polly after the babies come, but my guess is they were probably gonna try to push her out of the picture. And I still don't know, because I've forgotten everything that happens in the show that I've already watched before. I'm sure something happens. I don't know. What was I saying? Oh, right. So she's living with the Blossoms and she starts doing some digging because she wants answers into what happened to Jason. And, the police aren't making very much headway. And though Betty and Jughead and the others are also trying, they can't really put together any of the pieces. There's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on with her parents and with Veronica's parents who are involved in this whole thing, especially her dad, the sketchy one. And Cheryl's parents. Cheryl's dad is presumably very involved. And so they're still, trying to put together the pieces. And Polly convinces Cheryl to go through her parents' bedroom with her. And they find the engagement ring that Jason gave her. And this kind of starts turning some gears in Polly's head because, and Cheryl's for that matter, because they're like, how do they have the ring if Jason was murdered when he was planning to run away with Polly? Like, why would his parents have this thing that Jason had on him at the time of his death? Jughead's dad, who is part of a gang called the Serpents, the Southside Serpents, they start suspecting him a little bit. Not Jughead. Jughead is oblivious to all of this, but Archie and Veronica begin to suspect that Jughead's dad was employed by Veronica's dad to kill Jason. Because of some reason, I don't know, something about business and maple syrup. Okay, so Jughead's dad, he ends up getting arrested because the cops go into his home and they find the gun that was used to kill Jason. This immediately sets off, what am I trying to say? Veronica and Archie immediately know that something is up because they also searched FP's, who is Jughead's dad. They previously searched his trailer and they did not find the gun and they looked everywhere. And so they're like, hold up, wait, this was planted. They try to track down a serpent and they find out that he has OD'd or possibly he was murdered and it was made to look like he OD'd because they find a bag with Veronica's dad's initials on it. And so he's clearly, and this bag has, of course, tons of money in it. And so they're led to believe that he has something to do with all of this. So Jughead obviously gets very upset because his dad had promised him he was going to put his act together, like stop drinking and get the family back together. And then he confesses to the murder of Jason Blossom, which is probably not very good for their relationship. All of that's happening. Meanwhile, at the Cooper house, Betty and Betty's mom find out the reason why Betty's dad didn't want Polly to be with Jason. And this is apparently because the Coopers and the Blossoms go way back, like so far that they're actually family. Meaning that the Coopers and the Blossoms are cousins. One of the Blossom dudes, like way a long time ago, killed one of the other Blossom dudes. And that side of the family was so upset by this that they completely took a different name. They detached from the family. They didn't want anything to do with the Blossoms anymore because the Blossoms are murderers, And so that means that Polly and Jason were like third cousins or something like that, meaning that they were related. And that's why they shouldn't have been together. Betty's mom is like, well, you know what? We're gonna go get Polly. Like, she cannot be there in that house with them anymore. We're going to pick her up. So they go and get Polly, and Polly finds out about the incest too. Poor girl. And then they take her home. And that's pretty much it on that note. But back at the Blossom Manor, Cheryl is beginning to question a lot about her parents. She's wondering more and more about the business, about the supposed fight that happened between her dad and Jason right before his murder. Just a lot of pieces start clicking together in her mind, and it's not looking too pretty. So she confronts her mom, and her mom is like, you know, her usual manipulative, abusive, mean self, and she shuts her down. But then Betty and Jughead and the others, they find a jacket, Jason's varsity jacket, and this leads them to put together another piece about the murder because they find a flash drive in the pocket lining of Jason's varsity jacket. And this was a USB flash drive video of Jason being shot by his own father. Anyway, yeah, so they find all this out and things are very bad, and they give the flash drive to the police, and it looks like things are, you know, gonna start clearing up now that we know who the murderer was. But they don't, because when they go to arrest Jason and Cheryl's dad, whose name I cannot remember, they find that he has hanged himself in the barn, the maple syrup barn. That's pretty much it for that. And I lied before. I still have another episode of the show that I need to watch. I believe there are 13 episodes, and I have only watched 12. So this whole video is clickbait. It's all a lie. I'm very sorry. And that's all I have to say on the plot, really. However, I will say that the show is not quite as terrible as I remember it being, because before it was all just complete idiocy, and now that I'm older and in a different place where I can kind of analyze things differently, it's just beautiful, and I don't even know how to explain it. I really don't know. I don't really know. I don't really know. I'm gonna go for now. I might add another snippet after I watch the final episode, just so this can be an official season 1 type episode. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. I'm gonna go. See ya. Alrighty. I am back, and it's a new day. So, apparently we have a lot more to talk about because a lot happens in the final episode, and also I need to conclude the video, which I didn't really do in my first take. So yeah, we're gonna do that. So episode 12 starts, and we find out that Mr. Blossom, you know, he's hanged himself, whatever. Apparently he was transporting heroin as a secret side business along with his maple syrup. Big shocker, I know. Jughead's dad is still in jail because he did help, you know, clean up the murder or whatever. So Jughead is, because his dad is in jail still, Jughead's getting put into a foster home, and he's transferring schools. He's going to be living on the south side of Riverdale, where apparently all of the bad kids live and go. So, you know, like, everyone's like, we can't have that. And so they, like, go to see him at this new school, and they're like, no, Jughead, you can't do that. We're going to fight for you. And it's just, it's very sweet. I don't really have anything else to say about that. It was just kind of weird. It's like, yeah, okay, he's moving to another school. He's not moving to another country, but apparently it's a big deal to them. So we'll let them have their sweet sentimental moment. We're not going to ruin that for them. Oh, we also find out that Betty has a secret brother, which, shocker. I don't really think they mentioned anything else about that. Like, Betty's mom tells her about it because she's very upset, and that's why they sent Polly to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy. Apparently it was a very big deal because she and Hal, like, fought over it when they were teenagers. I don't know, it was a whole thing. Oh, okay. So we're gonna move right along because we're trying to wrap this up. Guys, my first video was like 56 minutes. I How did I talk about Riverdale for 56 minutes? Because I don't know. I'm genuinely mind boggled. So if anyone has any explanations for that, please let me know. Cheryl tries to kill herself in Sweetwater River. It's very dramatic. She goes out onto like the frozen river and she breaks the ice and she falls in. And then Archie saves her by punching a different section of ice to get her out. And I was very confused by this because the amount of time it took him to break the ice, like, it took a while. And surely Cheryl would have like floated on by then, but apparently she stayed put while he broke the ice. So that was considerate of her. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about that except I don't think it's given the proper amount of attention it should have gotten. They just kind of like move on from that and don't discuss Cheryl's mental health issues after that, so that's cool. And there's like this whole like jubilee thing where the town comes together to talk about how they've all been so deeply affected by all these tragedies, and Archie sings a song. Betty gives a speech about everything that's happened, and honestly, I don't remember any of it. Then Cheryl burns down her house to give her and her mom a fresh start, which I'm sure is a very impactful metaphor in her mind, but at the same time, I think that there are saner solutions than burning down your house. Where are you gonna live now, Cheryl? She definitely needs to get checked out by a therapist. At the very end of all this, Archie and Veronica go back to her house, and that's not important, but at the same time, Betty and Jughead go back to his house. And, you know, they're fooling around as teenagers do, and they tell each other that they love each other as teenagers do. And then they get interrupted by the Southside Serpents. And Southside Serpents are just like, you're one of us now, you're family. And it's very sweet. You know, I don't know if you can describe gang activity as sweet, but it's very nice how they are going to look after Jughead because his dad's in jail. And also, on the same night, Archie's dad gets shot. It's very, I keep saying dramatic, but it is quite dramatic. This is a very dramatic finale of season 1. So Fred gets shot in Pops. We don't really get a whole lot of information on that during this time, just kind of like, what the heck? Someone came into Pops and they were wearing like a homemade ski mask and they shot Fred. And that is all that we see in that episode, and that's the end. That's the end of season 1. I just have to say that a whole lot happens in this episode. Like, I don't really know what the reasoning was for cramming so much into the finale. I guess it was so that people had something to look forward to in season 2, but it's still just kind of like, whoa, all of this is thrown at us out of nowhere. So, you know, that's fun. It definitely gives you something to think about. I realized when I was editing the first portion of this video that I never really discussed why I like Riverdale. I think the fact that I can talk about one season of this show for an hour is proof enough of why I like the show. Honestly, I don't know if there's anything more I can say that I haven't already, because honestly, this show is so dramatic and it is just wild enough to be both hilarious and intriguing, and that's really impressive. It's really impressive the amount of terrible teenage TV show writing that goes into this. I love some of the characters. I love Betty with my whole heart. Other characters I don't love as much. Veronica's not my favorite, as I'm pretty sure I said before. I don't know. I don't really know what it is about the show that I like. I can't really sit here and break it apart for you because I don't even understand it myself really, but I love this show, and so I'm probably going to keep talking about it as I go along and watch the rest of the seasons. And if you're interested, feel free to join and we can scream about Riverdale together, or you can tell me how dumb I am. Trust me, you won't be telling me anything I don't already know. But anyway, I'm gonna go because I have real life things to do. I'm gonna go now. Bye.